Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider. Matthew Coller here. And this is the one that we have been talking about for a very long time. Years we have talked about what is going to happen at the quarterback position. When is Kirk Cousins going to play somewhere else? When will the Vikings take another step toward trying to win a Super Bowl rather than exist in the mediocre circle of hell that they have lived in for the last 6 years? And that answer is today, March 11th, somewhere around 1:30 Central Time. The Minnesota Vikings no longer have Kirk Cousins as their quarterback, as Cousins' agent announced a 4-year contract with the Atlanta Falcons. And now the doors are wide open for the future. Drafting quarterbacks, looking elsewhere for other veteran quarterbacks to bring in, building around a potential rookie quarterback contract. The draft just got very, very interesting for the Minnesota Vikings. And for Kirk Cousins, this is the best possible landing spot for him. It was from the outset of this. The Falcons have built their team over years to be in a position where they could sign a win now type of quarterback to a preposterous 4-year contract for someone who's 36 and just coming off of an Achilles injury. But that is a risk that they are in a position to take, and that the Minnesota Vikings were never in a position to take. And had Kirk Cousins come back, and if the Vikings had signed him to a 4-year deal, I see no path that they would have been able to win around Kirk Cousins. History tells us that no matter what they did, no matter which players they signed, no matter any way that they messed with the salary cap, no matter if they had a great defense or a bad defense or great receivers, or if they beefed up the offensive line, or if they had a great play caller, or if they had a great running back, all the options through the last 6 years, all the buttons were pressed by the Minnesota Vikings, and it never got them where they wanted to go, and really never got them anywhere close. One trip to the divisional round in 6 years is not enough to justify another contract for Kirk Cousins. This also matches up with exactly what we thought the plan was from day one with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell, which was to build up to this moment where the Minnesota Vikings could seek out their future quarterback in the NFL draft. It also just so happens to be a very good draft for quarterbacks. And Kwesi Adofo-Mensah said, we've been looking at this draft class for years. Well, now you get to look even closer over the next couple of months as the Vikings will have their opportunity to try to find their true franchise quarterback. They will have the cap space to put into the roster that they have not had for so long. And maybe, just maybe, they will find somebody who is a playmaker, someone who makes the head coach wrong, right when he's wrong. If he calls a bad play, maybe they find a guy who can do something rather than just get sacked or checked down. Now, this is not to hate on Kirk Cousins, but it is to live in the reality of what we have watched over the last 6 years, which is a day late, a dollar short, a free agent signing goes bust here or there, and everything comes apart because the quarterback was just not good enough to take them over the top to the next level. That is the reality that we have lived in for the last 6 years in watching Kirk Cousins as the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. And now as he leaves, you do have to acknowledge that he gave the Vikings the best possible quarterback play that Kirk Cousins could have given them. Over all 6 years, he performed better than he ever did when he was in Washington, but it still wasn't enough. And it speaks to the flawed decision to bring him in 2018 and how they thought he was going to be the final piece that took him over the top. And of course, the Atlanta Falcons are trying to make that argument to themselves right now that Kirk Cousins is the final piece that's going to take them over the top. And we'll see how it plays out. And there's no ill will, I think, from Vikings fans or anybody else about Kirk Cousins, that he played nearly every game until the final season. He performed at a very high level one that constantly put him in the top 10 to 15 quarterbacks in the league. But as far as the weaknesses that made him a top 15 quarterback rather than a top 5 quarterback, that made the Vikings a good offense, but never a great offense, they held the Vikings in this place in mediocrity and as being an average team. They were a road cone for the real teams, the real Super Bowl contenders to go around en route to actually contending. And it feels like those shackles have come off today. And now the opportunity exists to become Philadelphia, to become the San Francisco 49ers, to build around one of the best wide receivers the NFL has ever seen, and to build around one of the best left tackles in the league, and to give the head coach, who is a former quarterback, an opportunity to pick his guy and to grow with that quarterback into the future. This right now is one of the most exciting moments for Minnesota Vikings fans, I believe, since I've covered the team. I started covering the team in 2016. Obviously, the Minneapolis Miracle and the lead up to the NFC Championship would have been at the top of the heap for the most exciting moment. And for many, signing Kirk Cousins in 2018, the Super Bowl or bust season, that would have also qualified as one of those moments. But since then, how many have we had? A throw to Kyle Rudolph in the back of the end zone in the wild card round of 2019, a 4th and 19 conversion against the Buffalo Bills by Justin Jefferson with an unbelievable catch. And beyond that, a comeback against the Indianapolis Colts. There's been fun moments along the way. But beyond that, did you ever believe after 2018 that the Kirk Cousins Vikings could go deep in the playoffs and could be a championship contender? And I think the answer is no. Even during their best season in 2022, when they won 13 games in the regular season, by the end of that year, a lot of people were picking the New York Giants to beat them in the playoffs because they were never truly a contender. And then ultimately, the Giants proved the people right who thought this team is not as good as it looks like in the standings. And if that is the best year that you have to boast, is one time you didn't even outscore your opponents and won a lot of games at the end, and that was the best you could do over 6 years, then it was not a success. So we have to deal with those two things as we look back, which is that Kirk Cousins played about as well as he could have played. He gave the Vikings everything that they needed to get from him. He gave them dedication. He ran their offenses, the many different kinds of offenses they tried. He learned them. He operated them. He was available for them. He played almost every single game until his Achilles popped. And the numbers he put up are all-time great in Vikings history. Fran Tarkenton, number 1. Tommy Kramer is right behind Fran as far as your yards and touchdowns and things like that. And then there's Kirk. Well, I think Kirk is actually 2nd in touchdowns and 3rd in total yardage. And throughout this era, he had moments where he played and stretches where he played like an MVP, but it was always fleeting. It was always glimmers of hopes and then disappointment. It was always a great performance against the Saints and then a meltdown against the 49ers, in which he didn't even reach 200 yards passing in their loss in their only divisional round appearance when he was with the Minnesota Vikings. It was an amazing game in Buffalo and then a 40-point loss to the Dallas Cowboys. It was an amazing comeback against the Colts and then a loss to Green Bay where the offense no-shows. There were far too many times where Kirk Cousins would get your hopes up and make you believe this year could be the year. This offense can really do it. This game is the one that they're going to win that puts them over the top, only to come just short. And that is how I will remember the last 6 years, is that the first 2 years, one in 2018, is one of the most disappointing seasons in Minnesota Vikings history, and he did not play well that season. And he could not overcome a poor offensive coordinator, a poor left guard, even though they did have a very good defense that year. And in 2019, his shining season, his best by quarterback rating, his best by their accomplishments in the playoffs, still was short of what they needed to make that group that had gone to the NFC Championship in 2017 an actual Super Bowl contender. So it was always just not quite enough. And then over the last few years, from 2020 on, it felt like we knew the ending to the movie right before it even started. When we walked into training camp, we understood that the 2020 through 2023 Minnesota Vikings did not have much of a chance to compete for the Super Bowl. And that wasn't just my feeling or your feeling. Go back and look at the Vegas odds. They never took the Vikings seriously from 2020 to 2023 as an actual contender, which tells you really everything about this era of football with Kirk Cousins. Is they were always expected to win 8 to 10 games, and they were never expected to actually be a favorite for the Super Bowl. And this is where we have to say one last time, say it with me, folks. You know what we're going to say. It wasn't all Kirk's fault. Say it one more time, just for the road, because you'll never have to say it again. Man, that feels like something to not have to say it again. You won't have to say it again, but we should say it. It's not all Kirk Cousins' fault. And from my own perspective, I have a deep respect for Kirk Cousins. And it's always been a difficult balance for me as covering the team and covering the franchise and talking about the franchise's lack of success with Cousins as their quarterback, while also analyzing his play that was routinely extremely good. And this is a guy who went from a 4th-round draft pick from a team where their fans didn't want him. The owner didn't even want him. They wanted RG3. And he has fought his way through hard work, dedication. You saw it during the Netflix series. He has improved himself through his toughness, his mental toughness, and all those things to get to the point where even at 36 years old, another franchise wants to give him a 4-year mega contract. It's an incredible accomplishment. And that's what's always been difficult about this. And I think this goes for everyone, is that it's an incredible accomplishment for Kirk Cousins to have reached this level that so few quarterbacks ever reach. I mean, we're talking about only the Aaron Rodgerses of the world get these types of contracts late in their career. That's not to say he's Rodgers. It's just to say that Russell Wilson just signed for $1 million. I know there's contract stuff there, but Russell Wilson is probably going to have to battle for a job in Pittsburgh with Kenny Pickett, whereas Kirk Cousins is being locked in to the Falcons as their franchise quarterback now going forward. That's amazing. That is amazing. And it speaks to him. It speaks to his football character. And what we saw over the last 2 years is, especially under Kevin O'Connell, the locker room believing in Kirk Cousins, buying into him. The emotions of Brian O'Neill in the Lambeau Field locker room after he tore his Achilles were real. And his belief in Kirk Cousins and the leadership galvanizing around him, that was real over these last 2 years. And I'll always wonder what it would have been like had Kevin O'Connell been the head coach over the first 4 seasons of Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, because maybe fate is different if that had happened. Because over these last 2 years, they never had the roster to truly, truly be a contender with Kirk Cousins. In 2018, they did. In 2019, they did. And yet he didn't have the belief of his head coach, and they were always a little bit short, in part, I think, because of the lack of confidence that was instilled in other players around Kirk Cousins. But over the last 2 years, we saw him come out of his shell. We saw him become much more of a leader inside that locker room. And I don't think it was him acting different. I think it was really the younger players and the coach embracing him as that leader and making him their guy. And that's relevant to the whole discussion, that as he leaves, I think there is a little bit of a, hey, I wonder what could have been if this type of coach and this type of buy-in had happened for Kirk Cousins during the entire time here. But that also defines the time of Kirk Cousins in Minnesota, which is, hey, what if that had happened? What if they had not had to go to Tom Compton as their starting left guard, or Dakota Dozier? What if the offensive line from last year had been there in 2018 or in 2020? What if the defense from 2018 had been superimposed into 2022? Maybe they're a Super Bowl contender, but that's not how sports works. That's imagination land. That's always been where we've had to live with Kirk Cousins, is imagination land. We always had to imagine a world where it worked. But in the reality, in the final standings, it was just okay. And it didn't work. And they didn't reach the levels that they were trying to reach when they signed him. So it was not a success. Kirk Cousins, as a person, as a quarterback, is a success in the NFL. Massive success story. But this franchise was not a success with him as a Minnesota Viking. And I think we can live in both of those worlds. We can respect him. We can appreciate his abilities. He's one of the most accurate quarterbacks of the NFL in the last decade. He is prepared. He works incredibly hard. All those things you can respect for him. And in this last year, it's worth mentioning because I was told it meant a lot to him to be named the Media Good Guy Corey Stringer Award winner that we as a beat awarded Kirk Cousins with. You saw his personality come out more this year. You saw him take on that type of leadership role more. You saw his honesty after he got injured with the Achilles. And I'll tell you that anybody who was in that stadium, even Green Bay Packers fans, had to have been gut punched by watching Kirk Cousins go down and end his Vikings career that way, because it seemed like he was coming into a different level of performing in Kevin O'Connell's offense. And then to hear him talk about it and how difficult it was, you could tell how much football means to him. And one of the things that I will never, ever say is that he's greedy. He's only about the money. He doesn't care about his team. He only cares about him. I don't think so. I think that's football. I think that's pro sports. That's how all pro sports, all entertainment works, that you go out into a free agent market and you look for the best offer. You look for the most buy-in. Here's what the dollars represented. 4 years from the Atlanta Falcons. Would any of us take a 1 year or 2 year contract from the Vikings with mediocre buy-in, with a tepid buy-in versus a 4 year contract that says we love you, we want you, we care about you? All of us would negotiate contracts for the most possible money. And if you're ever going to blame anyone for signing Kirk Cousins, it shouldn't be Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins and his agent are allowed to ask for the world. And the Vikings gave it to him repeatedly, and now the Atlanta Falcons are giving it to him. And you know what? This is a very competitive person. And I think even the contract element has been part of Kirk Cousins' competitiveness. He's always felt underappreciated. He's always felt underrated, going back to even Michigan State, where he was never penciled in as the guy that was supposed to be the starter. So it shouldn't come as any surprise that he would go out and look for the most appreciation and the most love from a team that really wants him. But if you look at the other contracts that were signed, Jonathan Grenard signs with the Vikings. We'll talk about that. But are we criticizing Jonathan Grenard for taking a big contract? No. Would we have criticized Christian Wilkins for taking a big contract? No. Did we ever go back and say, how dare you, Anthony Barr, take this big contract? No, we said, why did the Vikings do this? So I will never criticize Kirk Cousins for asking for the world, because people have given it to him. And now he is headed to the Atlanta Falcons, as they are the team to give it to him. And before I get to some of your comments, and welcome all of you who are watching in what feels like a franchise turning moment for us here, that Kirk Cousins leaves the Minnesota Vikings and lands with the Atlanta Falcons, we have to turn to what's next for the Vikings. We've been talking about it a bit on the show. We've been talking at the combine about the quarterbacks and the quarterback class and the best options and what they should do at quarterback in the veteran market to bring someone in. But I think we should stop before we get into that here and just say it is a remarkable feeling to have everything on the table, as opposed to knowing what you have, knowing the shortcomings of that, knowing how challenging it is to build a winning team around a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who is very expensive and not one of the truly elite quarterbacks in the league. Somebody who's made up as much as 17% of the salary cap in the past. That was very difficult to overcome. We all knew that. And even if you spent every free agency period of the past getting really excited about Delvin Tomlinson or Michael Pierce, I think you all knew in the back of your mind, is this really going to be a signing that can take the Vikings over the top with this quarterback? And the answer was consistently no. And that's where it felt inevitable. The Vikings felt inevitable to be an 8 to 10 win team. And I remember a couple years ago, doing a podcast with Dave Campbell of the Associated Press, and I said, what do you think about this team, Dave? What do you think the expectations are this year? And he said something like, don't we always kind of know? And that's the point, right? We always kind of knew. And now we can step back over the next number of weeks leading up to the draft and appreciate the fact that we don't know. We don't know what's coming next. We don't know the answer. And we're all going to find out together. What a feeling to find out together. What a feeling to speculate with actual backing about this quarterback class. In years past, it was, hey, do you think they might pick Matt Corral or something? Hey, do you think they might do something like trade up for Justin Fields where they meekly tried once upon a time? Oh, they picked a 5th round quarterback. Oh, they picked a 3rd round quarterback. Well, not this time. This time, the doors are open for just about anything. And there is a freedom to that, but there's an excitement to that. To every single conversation we have leading up to the draft feels so important and so relevant. And I can't wait to talk to Chris Trapasso from CBS Sports about this tomorrow on the show, because now his opinions mean so much to me about this quarterback class. And I'm going to be reading everything and watching everything that I can to learn as much about this quarterback class, because we know it's real. Not, hey, maybe they'll make some crazy trade for Anthony Richardson, as was rumored last year. And I think that we also have to stop and say that from the time a new regime takes over, you really don't know. You don't know how the coach is going to react to pressure. You don't know how he's going to call the game and how he's going to lead the locker room. And you don't know from a management perspective how the front office is going to operate with its roster. And had the Vikings brought back Kirk Cousins, I would have been totally baffled at what their plan was, because it just wouldn't add up with anything else that they had done and anything else that they had said. But the fact that they actually drew the line in the sand and they stuck to that line in the sand, they were not going to give Kirk Cousins 4 years. They were not going to say, no one else is going to be our quarterback. You're our guy. You're our one and only, period. And we're going to build this whole thing around you for whatever dollar amount you want. That is not what they did. And they showed their appreciation for him publicly, but with their offer, they did not move. And I think there are times in football where you have to move, where you have to say, all right, this is happening by any means. We need this player. We're going to get him. But did we feel like that was the case with Cousins? No. And if they had buckled and if they had given 4 years, it just would have made very little sense based on the rest of the roster and everything they did to this point. So the front office and Kevin O'Connell and the ownership and the Wilfs, who many of you have chided in the past, and I've said, well, let's hold on. Let's see how this plays out. The ownership, the management, the head coach making this decision that Kirk Cousins is worth X number of dollars and not more. And if somebody else wants to go crazy, we're going to let them. And then sticking to that deserves a lot of credit. It deserves a lot of credit, because they are now taking a step into uncertainty. And for us, that's very exciting, but for them, it's probably very scary. And what Kirk Cousins has always provided is sort of that security blanket that you know you're going to get a baseline level of play from Kirk Cousins. And to move on from him and to take that risk and to roll the dice on the next quarterback to really try to win something, to really try to build a roster around a rookie quarterback, to really look for that next guy who has the huge arm or the playmaking ability. And now this also makes me think that they've got a sense for who they want in the draft and who they could live with in the draft, and assessing that this was the time to do it and not crossing the line last year and holding tight last year and saying, no, we're not going to give you your 3 years fully guaranteed or whatever it was that he wanted last year. They deserve a ton of credit for that. I don't know what's going to happen next. It could go terribly wrong. Maybe it will. I don't know. It could go really right as well. But the fact that they were willing to step out on that ledge and put this regime's future on this upcoming decision and take a swing at building a great team as opposed to just a good team with Kirk Cousins. This is what they should have done. This was what should have been the plan from day one of them being hired. I always felt it was, and now today it is, as Cousins leaves to go to the Atlanta Falcons. And before I get to your comments, and I see all of you, and I appreciate so much that you guys are in the comments. And let's see. Okay, so I'm just kidding because I fired this up right after I saw that he signed, but 4 years, 180 million with 90 million guaranteed. That would have been insane. It would have been insane. It just would have been an absolutely crazy thing for the Minnesota Vikings to do, to sign Kirk Cousins to that much money. So to just put a bow on it, I will say that I think that it is very reasonable to think that sorry, I'm just seeing the Van Ginkel signing. Hold on, we'll get to that. I just think that it's very reasonable to think that the Atlanta Falcons could be good with Kirk Cousins. I think that they'll be a contender. They could very well win the NFC South. I would bet on that. But can he take them over the top? That I don't know. So 180 million with 90 million guaranteed. Hell no. Absolutely not. In no universe would that have made even the slightest bit of sense for the Minnesota Vikings, considering where they are, considering that they have to pay Justin Jefferson. Absolutely not. Now, hey, Andrew Van Ginkel, how about this? The Minnesota Vikings already using the money that they have from Kirk Cousins to be real, true players in free agency. They pick up Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel. These two players are excellent free agent signings. Van Ginkel is an extremely versatile player. He's a guy that was with Brian Flores before, who has played a lot of different positions. He graded extremely high by PFF as a blitzer and also as a guy who could drop back in coverage. He's not that old. He's only, I believe, 29 years old. And Jonathan Grenard is only 27 years old, or will be when the season starts next year. So now they have players who are real top-notch free agents signing here. Well, let's think about why that's different from what's happened over the last 6 years, where they have so rarely been true players in free agency. Oh, yeah, that's because they were paying their quarterback an incredible amount of money. So what we're seeing right now, you guys have joked before, let Kwesi cook. How do we feel about him now? I mean, look, as far as Kwesi adofo-mensah, where he stands, he's got to prove it. They have to prove it by winning. The front office does. The head coach does. They've got to get this huge decision right. But let's have a look at just today. They did not cross their line with Kirk Cousins and give him this insane contract that Atlanta just gave him that, hey, could turn out like Russell Wilson if he doesn't return to being the player that he was. So they didn't do that. And now already they have two defensive ends that are top-notch players in free agency. There were two of the biggest names that were out there, and now they are Minnesota Vikings. And immediately, let's think about the defense now. They need a defensive tackle. We all agree on that. Maybe in the draft, that's going to be part of it. They have now two edge rushers that have the potential to combine for around 20 sacks together. They have Ivan Pace Jr. at linebacker. They're going to need another one. They're going to need another cornerback, in which they have been connected to L'Jarius Sneed in a potential trade, which would be fantastic. So if they were able to pick up a cornerback that could be a shutdown player to combine with Mekhi Blackmon, Byron Murphy Jr., we'll see what happens with Harrison Smith if he retires. But Josh Metellus, a key player, Cam Bynum, a solid player. Now they have pressure from the outside that they didn't even have last year. We're already seeing the fruits of Kirk Cousins leaving, and it's only 3 hours into the legal tampering period. And this is what we've talked about for so long, is you just can't spend that much money when one guy is making so much of it. But now they can. And we don't know what to put them as far as expectations for 2024 because we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. If it's Sam Darnold and Bo Nix, well, then I think that they could be competitive, but I don't know if they could be real contenders. And Wilson's already off the board, Mayfield's off the board. So veteran quarterbacks who are starters are not going to be the next quarterback here. So it's probably going to be someone like, Ryan Tannehill paired with a rookie. And there could be some serious ups and downs in 2024. But if you get the quarterback situation right, you've already signed these two young edge rushers. We've finally signed these two young edge rushers that are expensive and had the money to do it. They finally were able to do that. And then you go into 2025 and the dead cap from Kirk Cousins, the $28 million that will kick in on Wednesday, then all of a sudden you're going to have more space. Tyrod Taylor, another option brought up in the comment section. And they could look to trade up as well to get their quarterback. They could take a number 11. I mean, there's so many potential options here for the Vikings. But 2025, considering they've already landed a couple of these big free agents, and then they can spend more. So you know how everybody is saying, well, the Bears, they're spending all this money. The Texans, they got all this money. That can be you now. That can be you. The Minnesota Vikings now only next year, although they've already been spending this year because they can kick out some of that into 2025. When they sign these huge contracts, some of it doesn't all have to go into this year and this year's cap situation. So there is so much to be decided here. And it feels like every day and the rest of this free agency period is potentially extremely interesting with who they're going to add to fill out this roster. Also worth noting, Blake Brandel and David Quessenberry are coming back. So that's happening. But Andrew Van Ginkel and Jonathan Grenard, already the fruits of allowing Kirk Cousins to go. And this has always been the point. And that's why I wanted to make it very clear on the day that Kirk Cousins leaves, that it was never really about him and if he could play or if he was a good quarterback. It was, can you win as a franchise? Can you actually win as a franchise when you can't sign? If they brought back Cousins on this dollar amount, 4 years, $180 million, do you think that they could sign? I mean, that is over $40 million a year. Do you think that they could sign Jonathan Grenard and Andrew Van Ginkel and then add the rest of the roster? No, they would not be able to do that. And we know that for the entire past. We are very aware from the entire Vikings past that they were not able to do that. So Aaron Jones released. Is that true? Wow. How about that? That does sort of scream Viking, doesn't it? Aaron Jones still had it last year. Is that a cap type of situation? Tyrod Taylor will call out Purple Insider in his opening press conference. I've told you guys before that I have immense respect for Tyrod Taylor. It's really that he's a great example. And there are many of them, examples of teams making this very move, which is to take an average quarterback and move on and aim for better. And it's not always the same strategy. I mean, the Detroit Lions knew that they needed a complete rebuild, so they moved on from Matthew Stafford. They got a good quarterback in return, and they built the rest around Jared Goff. So there's not always one way to do it. It doesn't have to be draft the quarterback at the very top, but you have to either have a great roster or you have to have a great quarterback, and the Vikings have not had either. Josh Jacobs to the Packers. Wow. How about that? That is surprising that Josh Jacobs would end up with Green Bay. Didn't really have a very good year last year, but maybe that was in part because of Vegas. I think he also missed a big part of their training camp, and I think that sets you behind. So, no, I haven't been under a rock. I've been focused on the Vikings here. I did see that there was a report that Josh Jacobs was going to sign with him, but I hadn't talked about it on here. I haven't talked about almost anything because Kirk Cousins is an Atlanta Falcon. So there is a lot of other stuff to talk about for sure, including Jonathan Grenard and including now Andrew Van Ginkel, who I really like that signing. I mean, just a tremendously versatile player that you're going to see Brian Flores use all over the field. And we should even circle back and just say, as maybe everything coming up Vikings today is in part that Brian Flores stayed. And as far as being competitive next year, I think that, Brian Flores staying is a huge part of that. And being able to add this amount of talent now with Kirk Cousins' contract no longer on the Minnesota Vikings books, or at least in 2025, it will no longer be. So Kirk Cousins is still hurting you for one more year, but then he can't hurt you anymore after that. I would also assume, by the way, since we're running down some other stuff, that Danielle Hunter will be gone now that they have signed these other two edge rushers. And I would prefer to have two guys that are a little younger than Hunter, or at least less of an injury history for Van Ginkel and younger for Jonathan Grenard, than I would put $26 to $28 million into Danielle Hunter. We'll see how much he actually signs for. Hunter is an all-time great Viking, period. One of the best Vikings who's ever played. Incredible numbers, the way he bounced back from the neck injuries. And there's just has to be a separation between how much you love a guy, how much you appreciate a guy, and how much a guy costs. Now, there are some things to talk about with Jonathan Grenard. He is only a one-year guy for big sack totals. He had 8 sacks in 2021, but this last year was his closest to being an every down player. And he does have some injury history in the past. He does not have a whole lot of history of playing every down, like being a 3-down player. But when you look at some of the underscore numbers or underlying numbers, that he was solid against the run. He's a bigger guy. He's not one of those light edge rushers. He's more like 265 pounds. The injury history is a little bit scary, but let's not make a Marcus Davenport comparison. A guy having a foot injury here or an ankle injury there, it's pretty common for an NFL player, pretty common for a defensive end. He's played a lot of football games over his career, just not in the role that he had last year. And when he had it, he absolutely thrived and became a star. It is a big commitment. So they must be much more confident than they were with Davenport, because it's a 4-year commitment for Jonathan Grenard. So there's a little bit of, all right, we're going to see him do it again. We're going to have to see him continue to put up the numbers that he did last year on a consistent basis. And there is a little bit of, hey, the injuries, I'm not really, sure if that is going to be a problem going forward. But overall, I don't think that there's any comparison to between Marcus Davenport and Jonathan Grenard. I don't think that those are the same things. Grenard has made himself develop over a couple of years to be a really excellent player. All right, the Vikings signing a Blake Cashman, Minnesota guy, another Texan. This is, wow. Look at all the money that they can spend. I guess I just have to say it again. Look at all the money that they're able to spend in being able to sign Blake Cashman. Now, Cashman last year, let me pull this up. He had a real breakout year as well for the Texans. I'll pull up his numbers here. But he had been kind of a special teams guy, hadn't played a whole lot with the Jets, played 655 snaps, had an 84 or 83.7 PFF grade, graded really strongly across the board. Run defense, pass rush, coverage, all those things, of course, would be important to Brian Flores. His coverage numbers, which can be a little tricky, I'll admit, with PFF, that's, sometimes linebackers can look better or worse than they were before. Or from year to year with the PFF grades. But across the board, Blake Cashman was really excellent. I got to check here where he ranked among all linebackers. And also, I'm sure that a lot of you love the hometown guy element. But, I mean, this is another – they are rebuilding this defense. They are rebuilding this defense to win and to be good for years, because a lot of these guys are in their mid-ish 20s. So last year – let's see, where would he have ranked? Did he have enough snaps? Just trying to get this figured out here on the PFF site. Let's see. Oh, wow. He actually graded extremely good in the top 5. Wow. Yeah. Wow. He graded in the top 5 last year. That is remarkable. So a guy who as a linebacker, developed over a bunch of seasons, and now they get him in his prime, could be good over multiple years. That's really excellent. That is really excellent. I mean, they are crushing this free agent period. I mean, you have versatile players that they're signing, guys who have put up big sack numbers, and now a linebacker who has emerged as a really excellent player last year with a winning team in Houston to pair with Ivan Pace Jr. They are a defensive tackle away from having a pretty solid starting lineup, and a defensive tackle and a corner away from maybe even having a really good defensive lineup for Brian Flores to work with. And look at what happened with Brian Flores last year when all he had was Danielle Hunter on the defensive line, really, as far as someone who could create pressure. And they still have Harrison Phillips, but they need someone to go along with him. He had a rookie undrafted free agent linebacker. He had outside corners, Byron Murphy, who is a decent veteran player, but a Caleb Evans on the other side. They could do a lot better than that. And then made Josh Metellus into a versatile player. This does mean that Jordan Hicks is not coming back. And I have to shout out Jordan Hicks as a player who you're just kind of in awe of when you're around a veteran player like that. And I don't mean just from his pure talent. I mean from his character, from his toughness, from his personality. He was a guy that you just look at like, wow, somebody who had one of the grossest leg injuries you've ever seen and then came back from it. I mean, and played, just fought through that. Super, super tough. He had multiple injuries in his career, played really well as a Minnesota Viking. That turned out to be a great signing for them with Jordan Hicks. But they go to a younger guy to now put together with Ivan Pace Jr., who was an emerging star last year. Now let's take a look at the entirety of the roster. Is it deep? No, it's not. And they're going to need to do a lot more to fill out the depth. The defense needs a lot more work for sure. But this feels like at this moment, a solid roster that can stay together over multiple years. So they can continue to build around this group that are all in their mid, or it's not even really late 20s. Van Ginkel's a little bit older, but Grenard is still 26. He turns 27 soon. So, all right. I've talked a lot, and trust me, we're going to have so many guests coming on and discussions and everything else. But I want to know what you guys are thinking about this, and we can continue to talk for a while here because this is it is a momentous day. It is a day where it feels like they have an opportunity to take a big step forward as a franchise, and they already are. Cashman's 28. So they signed somebody who's going to be 27, 28, and I think Van Ginkel's 29. So these are guys who could be good over multiple years. These aren't guys that I would look at and go, oh, well, they're 33 and they're just on the edge or so forth. These are players who have all actually developed over a number of years. And I think you want to give Brian Flores veteran players. It was nice to see him develop younger guys, but if you're going to really maximize the defense, younger players. So I would guess that this was part of the trade-off. The trade-off is, look, for Kevin O'Connell, if you're going to lose your starting quarterback, that you got to go all in and throw a ton of cash at the defense and a ton of cash, man, at the defense. Get it? Cashman, Blake Cashman. Okay. Throw a ton of cash at the defense and rebuild this thing. So it's a good plan that I've liked all along. Andrew asked, will the Vikings get comp picks for Kirk and Hunter? Likely no. They would have, but the signings that they've made will probably counteract them. So that's how it works is if you sign somebody after letting somebody go, then it cancels it out. So I don't know right now. I mean, we're talking about a year from now when they'll announce them, but that's usually how it works. And the fact that they've made big signings, very possible that they cancel out and they don't get compensation for those two guys. Caleb asks, and here we go. Now here's something I'm excited about, guys. This is the first question I'm going to answer about the draft post Kirk signing with the Falcons. And I went to McDonald's, got a little Diet Coke here. I'm going to take a sip and I'm just going to let it sink in a little. That this question matters. This question is super relevant and we know it matters. So I'm just going to let that breathe for a second. It's the first time it's mattered in 6 years. You got to let me take it in. All right. Caleb wants to know, would you trade 3 firsts and Addison if it guarantees you Drake May? That's a good question. It's a great question. It's a question we're going to ask over the next month leading up to the draft because the Vikings are going to pick a quarterback. That's a lot, man. That's a lot. Adding Addison to it makes it very tough. Would I trade 2 firsts and Addison? Very possibly for guaranteed Drake May. That 3rd first, I mean, I guess once you've already gone all in with 2 firsts, it's a lot, but 3 firsts means being unable to do anything at the top of the draft. Now, if your assumption is, hey, we're not going to be at the top of the draft because we're going to spend like crazy, but Addison is such a key part to making that player successful. If that was the only way to do it and it was the only quarterback they really believed in, then I don't know, man. That's a hard one. That's a hard one. I probably would stop at 3 firsts, or I would go 2 firsts, Addison, and maybe a second in the future in order to move up. But I also think that there are other quarterbacks this draft who are good. It's not just Drake May or nobody like it was last year with Anthony Richardson or nobody. Enigma One says he is doing it the right way because he already understands the salary cap is going to rise by 25 million, and I believe the Vikings already projected at 5. I'm not sure at 5 what 5 means. Do you mean like for next year? Perfect time to reload your roster. No, I agree with you 100%. Agree with you, Enigma 100%. Is that the salary cap already went up this year, so they can spend a little bit more this year than they thought. But next year, the cap really goes wild for the Vikings. You get out from under Kirk's dead money. You get out from under Hunter's dead money. If Harrison Smith retires, then that's another chunk. They can restructure Brian O'Neill at any point if they want to. We'll see if they end up doing something like that. And Justin Jefferson won't yet be expensive. This is important that when you talk about windows to win and why 2025 would be the mark to hit, is that Jefferson will sign his extension and he will get a huge number and everybody will freak out and they'll say, oh my gosh, how are they going to build around this? But then the structure will come out and he won't actually be expensive until 2027. That's what's very likely to happen. That's what usually happens with all these deals. Even if you look at Jalen Hurts' deal as a quarterback, if you sign while you're on your rookie contract and you sign a longer term deal, 4 to 5 years, you could spread it out more and have those cap hits hit later, and then also set up for times to restructure. So, that 25, 26, they should have this window to spend like crazy, as they're already doing it. They're already doing it right now, today, which has been an incredible thing to see how the freedom is created by moving on from Kirk Cousins for the future. Jefferson to the Pats for the number 3 pick. Not into that. Definitely not into that. I think that it's too important to the quarterback that Justin Jefferson is here. And I would not want to do that. Jeff says, we're not going to be good this year. We're acquiring young talent and clearing cap for 2025. But it speaks to like expectations and how it all requires a lot of context. So if you were to tell me next year that the Vikings drafted Bo Nix and signed Sam Darnold and they won 7 games and they were competitive, but it just wasn't enough. And they won 7 games and Bo Nix started 10 of them and was pretty good, but not like all-time great. I would look at that and go, huge success, because it's all about where you're headed in your timeline, in your window. And if they were headed into 2025 with a legitimate chance to be like the 49ers, to be like the Eagles, remember it was year 3 for Jalen Hurts. It was year 3 for Josh Allen. It's been year 2 for some other quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes because that team was farther along. But usually year 2, year 3. So what you're looking for next year is to find out you're looking to learn, is the quarterback they drafted going to be the guy, or does he show signs? I mean, I remember Joe Burrow's first year was pretty tough, but he showed signs, and everybody in Cincinnati knew it. And I know I reference Buffalo a lot. I have so many friends and family there. After 2 years in Buffalo, they knew it with Josh Allen. He didn't have the best numbers. They didn't win the Super Bowl, but they knew it. And so that's the question that we're going to be watching so closely is, are you going to know by the end of 2024? And if you do, then it's a huge success. That the number of wins next year are important. I mean, you want to win games. You don't want to lose. That's why they're signing good players here. They want to win. Kevin O'Connell doesn't want to win 7 games, but they'll have the opportunity to find out where their quarterback stands and now move into next year with a chance, or the following season with a chance to be very, very good. So next year is a bit of a transition. A bit of a transition year, I think, next season, because they're very likely to have a rookie quarterback. But I mean, that's good though, because I think all of you get that. All of you understand that. Okay, this is funny. I have to put any reference to Arrested Development goes on the screen. Brian says Atlanta right now, just the Arrested Development, but it might work for us meme. So good. Such a good meme. You're right. You are right about that. The only difference is, here's what I'll give the Atlanta Falcons, is that they could make an argument that they're like the Lions with Jared Goff, because they have so many young players that have rookie contracts right now. Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. These guys are inexpensive and they're young and they're key pieces for them. So if you can have cheap and young players around your expensive quarterback, then it is possible to be successful in doing it. But there's always the question with Kirk Cousins of, can you actually get to the next level? Can you actually get deep in the playoffs? Can you go into San Francisco and get a performance that is going to have you win from your quarterback? And the answer was always no. It was always bumping up against potential success and falling short with Kirk Cousins. So what would you expect from the Atlanta Falcons? Probably to bump up against success, for Cousins to go 10-7 or 11-6 and to have really good statistics, and then for them to lose their home playoff game. That's what you would expect if you were laying it out, because that's what we've seen so often before. Jeff says, we're talking about tactical success versus strategic success. 2024 win total does not matter as much as building a team that can compete for a championship for a couple years. 100% agree, Jeff. You are dead on with that. That is totally true. That you are looking at 2024 as a route to true success. And you're going to have to go through that season, and your young quarterback is going to have to get experience. And hey, look, maybe you pick up Sam Darnold and he's amazing, but I doubt it, right? More likely than not, what you're going to have to do is go through that season to develop your quarterback, and you can win some games and you can have some good moments. But I look at it as like 2014. 2014 Vikings was a fun year for Vikings fans. They saw enough of Teddy Bridgewater to think that it was there. They saw enough of Mike Zimmer's defense to believe that he could scheme them to success. Enough of young players like Anthony Barr and Everson Griffin taking a big step forward. That's what you're looking for next year, not necessarily, oh, this is a championship caliber team. Taylor says, can we all agree Kirk will destroy us when we play Atlanta next year because Vikings? I don't know, maybe Brian Flores does know a lot about Kirk Cousins, and so does Kevin O'Connell. So, I mean, that's what a revenge game it's going to be. Although, can he really? Kirk doesn't get a revenge game. Doesn't count as a revenge game against the Vikings. They gave him $200 million. They gave him every opportunity. They gave him every extension. They spent to the salary cap every single year around Kirk Cousins. He has nothing to hold against them other than that they made a wise move to let him walk and not give him 4 years, 180 million. Say it again. That is way too much. If they had done that, I have no idea what I'd be saying to you right now. If they had signed him to 4 years, 180, I would have just stared at you guys in shocked silence and just been, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know how you get out of this. I don't know how you make this work. At least with Atlanta, you could see how it would work for sure because they have the team that's ready to do it. They were competitive last year with Desmond Ridder and Taylor Heineke. So you could definitely see it with this team where they are right now. So look at the players they just signed: Jonathan Greenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Blake Cashman. All have really cool names. Imagine having none of them or one of them. Would that be enough to get you anywhere? No, of course not. So I would have no answer. And look, I would think about this all the time when I was going for a jog or when I was going to Taco Bell or whatever. I would think about, because anything that I say on the air or podcast or YouTube, whatever, I've tried to organize the thoughts in my head. I don't just turn it on and go, hey guys, what do we all think? Like, I think about this a lot to try to come up with metaphors or to put it in context the right way. So I think about this stuff a lot. And I was racking my brain over the last 2 weeks of, if they bring back Kirk, what do I say? What plan could I come up with? What spin could I have on this? Not to try to spin positive, but this just to say, like, all right, well, this must be what they're thinking, because I would not understand it. I would have had very little to say. This would not have been going as long as it is right now, because I would have just said, all right, I guess we'll see you guys week 1. Because now this is another part of it that has me excited to talk with you guys about it. And I think a lot of you excited as well. And Chris says, I'm actually excited for the future of this team for the first time since the miracle. Yeah, I think that 2018, the problem with the way 2018 went was that by week 3, you knew something was wrong. And then it was a slog after that. You didn't have this run of, oh, we could really do it, and then it fell apart. When they had lost that game as whatever it was, 17-point favorites to Buffalo, you went, oh no, something is not right. But what I've been thinking about and talking about with my colleagues on the Vikings beat is, all of a sudden, like, so I have to apply for a credential to the owners' meetings. I really have to do that today. I'm doing that because I want to know what Kevin O'Connell is going to say down at the owners' meetings in Orlando in 3 weeks about the quarterback situation. I've never gone to the owners' meetings before. I'm going because it's exciting. And I'm going to do podcasts from down there. I mean, I'm ready. And OTAs, mini camp, all that stuff, the draft, it all becomes super relevant. It becomes franchise shifting. It becomes exciting to report on and talk about. Every one of those things. Rookie minicamp. Let's all go look at Michael Penix and see how he looks, right? I mean, all of it is just a different energy than has existed around this team in quite some time. I mean, I think even when they signed, or I'm sorry, hired Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell, when they hired them, there was a feeling of, how much are they going to change? What are they going to do? Are they going to take this team to a different place? But because the quarterback didn't change, then the feeling on what their ceiling was didn't change. Had they gone out and traded Kirk Cousins right away in 2022, then we would have been talking the same way as now. And I was really fascinated. I want to downplay that. That was an exciting moment to have a new GM and a head coach for fans. But when it was the same players, then it just didn't have the same type of feeling of, well, all these things are going to be crazy different, because it was the same guys just with different people pushing the buttons. Now, the Kevin O'Connell, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah regime can begin. That's how it feels today. Today, it feels like they've begun now that they're going to be picking their own quarterback. Nick says, could Darnold have a Geno Smith-style comeback? He's only 26, younger than Kirk was in his first year as a starter. So what I like about Sam Darnold is that what you just said to me doesn't sound insane. A lot of times with quarterbacks, if they didn't work out, it'll be like, do you think that he could do this that he's never done before? And you're like, I don't know, man. Probably not. That's how I feel about Justin Fields. Is like, do you think that Justin Fields with a good receiver could be great? Like, no, I really don't. But do I think that Sam Darnold, after going through hell in New York and in Carolina, and then spending a year to develop and acting as a backup, which just, it does impress me that he spent time working on the sideline as a backup with Brock Purdy, and you never heard a thing. You never heard his agent say, oh, well, Sam Darnold thinks he should be the starter or anything like that. They liked him so much as number 2 that they moved on from a guy they spent 3 firsts on. And I like that about Sam Darnold. He comes across as a mature quarterback. I've never thought that he was a doofus. Like I think about Zach Wilson, who's just way in over his head in the NFL environment. It's really been with Sam Darnold, the mistakes that he makes, the crazy decisions, and then the supporting casts and the coaching have been so poor. I mean, even when Teddy Bridgewater left Carolina, and Teddy Bridgewater never has a bad word to say about anybody. He was on a podcast and said, we didn't even practice situational stuff. Like, is that the coaching that Sam Darnold had in Carolina? You can convince me pretty easily that there's more there with Darnold than there ever has been before. Does that mean he's a franchise quarterback? No. Does that mean I would pass on drafting a quarterback? Oh, no. We're still drafting a quarterback here. But I like it, though. I like having someone who's mature, who's kind of been through it as a top draft pick to pair with somebody else. And then the potential that if Bo Nix or JJ McCarthy isn't ready, that's okay. You just play the other guy, play Darnold, and let him develop. That's okay. We can do that. Now it feels like we've got a lot of time. Nathan says, yeah, this is something I haven't brought up. Nathan says, guards are getting paid. Oh, yes, they are, my friend. Guards are getting crazy dollars out there. I think it was Jonah Jackson got $17 million a year. Oof. The dollar bills are flowing for interior offensive linemen. You know why? Because there's not very many good ones in the NFL, as you guys have been privy to. Although, I will say, if they get a playmaking quarterback, doesn't it feel less important that they have the best guards because maybe the guy could run away if there's some pressure? Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're right. I wonder what they're going to do as well. And this might be a situation where they have to sign multiple guys and have them fight it out in training camp. That might end up being the case at guard because the top guys are just so expensive. That is really difficult to spend 17 more million or 15 more million on the next best guard. So is there somebody analytically who they like or somebody scheme fit wise that they like, and then get 2 or 3 veterans, let them see who fits the best? You can't fill every position. Sometimes not only just price tag, but just availability. There's not very many guards available. Justin says, who's going to be the bridge now? There's a lot of options. There is a lot of options, and I'm comfortable with a lot of them. Sam Darnold is my favorite option as a bridge quarterback. Again, doesn't mean he's going to be great. Just means that I like the idea of it. I like the personality fit with he and Josh McCown. They know each other extremely well from the Jets. And I like that there's some upside. But there are other guys that are more pure veterans. So if it was Gardner Minshew, that could be pretty fun. And look at the way that he handled the situation last year in Indianapolis. That's going to mean some great. That's going to mean some bad. I've brought up Jacoby Brissett before as the ultimate mentor quarterback. Not a guy you want to start a lot. But if he's got to start 6 games to begin the season, that's okay. That's all right. So I think that there's a lot of options. Yeah, Minshew is a guy that I really like. Chris likes that option as. And when we say bridge, I kind of like the term mentor quarterback a little bit more because when I think of a bridge quarterback, I think of you got nothing and you have to get to a point where you can draft one. I'm more of thinking along the Ryan Fitzpatrick lines of someone that I can put together with my young quarterback rather than somebody who's getting me to when the team can draft the quarterback. If that makes sense. It's just a little bit different. So, let's see here. Jeff says, when I saw the Kirk headline, it instantly gave me hope for the first time since 2018. That's a long time to be down, and I've loved the team since 1961. That, it's a great point, is on a day like today that there is a feeling very much of like the shackles coming off and the hope that something next could be coming. And you felt the malaise inside the stadium. You felt it in the comment section. You felt it, like, think about this. The audience right now watching the show is 5 times bigger than we had for previewing games early in the season. Why is that? Because there's a belief that someday they can get there. As opposed to when you're going to, I don't know, play the Chargers and you're 0-2. It's just like, here we go again. Just another football game that we've seen many times before. And hey, it came down to the last moment and it wasn't his fault. How about that? So now, with all the different opportunities that they have at the quarterback position, there's just a wave that I think has come through Vikings fans of belief that there could be something else there to really chase for a championship. So, that is a feeling for sure. You guys are funny. What will Kirk say about Coller and his farewell letter? It's so funny that some people wanted on the internet, this just tells you how fake social media can be, that wanted to make it seem like there was some beef or something. Go read the article that I did on Kirk Cousins and his hometown newspaper in Detroit Lakes, Michigan, this last year. In the middle of the season, Kirk Cousins, and this is one of the reasons he won Corey Stringer Award, Media Good Guy, and I deeply appreciate this. I asked if he would be willing to talk about this. I interviewed the editor from his hometown newspaper, and in the middle of the week for a starting quarterback, they don't make time for reporters on the side one-on-one very often. Every once in a while, maybe once a season, but especially since they were 1-4 or something at the time, that's a tough time to ask. And so I asked Cousins if he could talk to me about this. And we walked and talked for about 10, 15 minutes, that time that he gave me specifically to write about his relationship with his hometown newspaper, which was super awesome, by the way. Huge fan of small newspapers, the people who get those jobs done, that cover high school games and stuff like that. That's why I wanted to tell that story, because Kirk still reads his hometown newspaper in, wait, did I say Detroit Lakes? In Holland. Sorry, that was Adam Thielen. In Holland, Michigan. So he still reads his Holland, Michigan newspaper and has a relationship with the editor there. And it's just such a great story to tell about Kirk, like his personality and how he keeps that hometown connection to Holland, Michigan. And he gave me that time. So if you look at it, and I wanted to tell that story. So if you're reading people on social media that tell you there's some beef, there's some he hates me, I hate him, it's totally bogus, total garbage, total nonsense, was never a thing. The only thing was that the reason why people made that up is because I was willing to acknowledge that it was a failure, that they didn't win more with him. And I didn't think from the beginning of signing him in 2018 that it was a good idea. And that's it. That's the whole thing. There's never been anything else. And I've written dozens of features on him, some praise, and I've written columns being critical, and that's what a reporter's supposed to do. So on the way out, I mean, this is someone who I thought was as first class with the media as any player that I've ever covered. And no matter how many times I've mentioned that, like, this is my job, that when there's things that have to be criticized, I say it. When there's things that should be praised, I say it. That's the job. And some people want to twist that maybe for their own gain, for their own attention and so forth. And some people are just sociopaths and make stuff up. So you got to be careful online who you're reading. Anyway, That probably needed to be said, I guess. Cardo says thoughts on the Snead trade rumors. Man, I'm just like, go crazy. Go crazy. If the foundation of your defense was Grenard, Van Ginkel, Pace, Jr., Metellus, Bynum, and Snead, and Brian Flores, you got something going. You got something going. You're not a championship level defense without more depth and without more development. And some of you, of course, because we're doing a live stream, have mentioned that they have failed on some draft picks recently. That is true. And they can't have that happen. They need to continue to develop some of these players. And sometimes they draft a player, and then 3 years later, they become good. We saw this from Josh Metellus. They drafted him, and 3 years later, he became good. So the players that they've drafted over these last 2 years, we really can't say at this moment are all just busts. There's time to develop still, but they need to find some of these players because you can't just have a starting lineup. You need to have much more than that. And I see Jonathan has put in the chat the story about Kirk Cousins. And I just can't say enough how much I appreciated his time during the middle of the season to tell that story. So, I just wanted to make that clear that, it's part of the job to say the truth, regardless of your personal feelings of whether you like somebody or not. There have been a lot of players through the years that I've talked to in the locker room, or I've done interviews with and written stories on, and I thought this guy's the best. But then if he makes a mistake in a game, that doesn't matter anymore. And so with a quarterback, the quarterbacks are always going to be at the center of all the criticism and all the praise. When Kirk was winning games in the last minute 2022, what did we all say about Kirk Cousins? We all said, wow, I mean, he has taken this to a new level of leadership, all those things that in the past we had criticized. We got new information, the situation changed, and so we changed what we said. But some people will never understand that it's not personal. This is what we do. This is what journalists do. We talk about the team. It's not personal. And sometimes that's hard for players too. And look, if Kirk Cousins over the years got pretty tired of media saying he couldn't win and of turning on the TV and watching ESPN and have those guys say he was a middling quarterback and not good enough, I mean, would you blame him? Would you blame his family for getting tired of it? Of course. I mean, social media beats these guys down. Television beats these guys down. That's why it takes a lot of mental strength for you to be a starting quarterback. It's the hardest part. So when it comes to the next draft pick, mental capacity has to be a huge thing. The ability to let some of that slide off. The ability to not really worry too much about what I'm saying on the live stream about him. Or what Ryan Clark is saying, or Stephen A. Smith, or whatever social media nuts that are out there criticizing the next quarterback, they will be there. Because we already see this, that every single one of the quarterbacks that I bring up, there's somebody in the comments who hates them. It's like, that's just how it is. So a lot of these quarterbacks have had everything kind of, pat them on the back and whatever else. Over the years that they've just been loved so much. It's kind of actually why I like Bo Nix and Michael Penix a bit, maybe more than other people, is that they've actually gone through some hard times, and that might help them. But it gets harder. And the fact that Kirk Cousins could keep the horse blinders on and never worry about that and just keep going and just keep playing the way Kirk plays. I mean, think about what happened in 2019. Stephon Diggs is going rogue or whatever, saying there's truth to all rumors, not showing up to practice. Everybody is hammering Kirk Cousins after losing that game to Chicago in, I think it was week 4. The guys on television are going ballistic because he apologized to Adam Thielen for missing a throw, which is wild to me because that happens all the time. Not missing the throw. I mean, apologizing to a receiver that you missed. I mean, my bad or whatever happens all the time, but for some reason, Kirk did it and they went crazy. And the next week, he went out and torched the New York Giants, won the game. Like, he's just never seemed to let that get to him. And it was always very impressive from him. Jeff says, on the day that Kirk just earned $180 million, he's not mad at anything or anyone. That's probably true. That is probably true. The only people he might be mad at is the Vikings for not matching the offer. But even then, you can't be upset if you're Kirk. Chris says, other than quarterback, what in your mind is the draft priority now? This is a great question because I had them. If you would have said rank the draft needs, of course, quarterback is up there on this golden throne of draft needs. Quarterback for sure. But then what's next after that was defensive end. But now that they've signed two, or outside linebacker, but now that they've signed two edge rushers, is that now the draft need? Now, I think it still could be. You still could get Dallas Turner with 11 and trade back into the first. That seems a little risky to me. Or look for a defensive tackle in the second. I'm just like, my mind is a little haywire right now with all the guys who could be potentially drafted. But the guy, Braden Fisk from Florida State, could be available in the second round. Beast defensive tackle, great at the Senior Bowl, crushed the combine, but doesn't necessarily look like someone's going to spend a first round pick on him. So that's the type of guy you're looking at. I think a penetration defensive tackle could be at the top of the list. And the other thing is too, that, if they don't land in a trade L'Jarius Sneed, then they could also look to the draft to take a cornerback in the second round. This appears to be a deep cornerback class that they could grab somebody. Will says, any guesses on a veteran running back that the Vikings will pair with their starting quarterbacks and improving defense? Go eat up some of that game clock. Yeah, so Tony Pollard is off the board. You guys will have to tell me because you've been scrolling Twitter and I've been talking to you over the last, hour or so. Tony Pollard I saw is off the board. That would have been a good idea. There hasn't been any steam, I think, for the Vikings and Saquon Barkley. They were connected to Pollard, though, which means that they're playing in that sandbox. And look, with the running backs, I know, and Josh Jacobs off the board to the Packers, I know that no one wants to spend on running backs. And a fan of analytics such as myself would tell you, like that part of me would tell you, hey, like you should not pay a running back. But the prices have been very reasonable. I mean, DeAndre Swift signed for $8 million a year. That's not that much. You spread that over 3 years. The first couple of years of cap hits are under that. That's totally fine. If it's 15, if it's 20, well, of course you're not spending that. But there's still those guys out there. Saquon Barkley, I'm very curious to see what he gets. There's guys like, Gus Edwards, who's a pretty good player. There's some veterans out there. If I had to guess, I would say they go cheaper veteran. But the fact that they were interested in Tony Pollard makes me wonder, and even Aaron Jones now being released, you put Aaron Jones with Ty Chandler, kind of like that. Aaron Jones revenge games we could have. But just from a practical standpoint, so that would be fun. From a practical standpoint, you'd probably prefer to get someone who's a little on the younger side, less injuries, less mileage on the body, and make it a duo with Ty Chandler that you can have for several seasons. That's what you're probably looking for. Sean says, if Penix is really a second-round talent, I'd love to move down a little bit from 11, grab an interior defensive lineman, then Penix at 32 after moving back into the first. All of the ideas about moving back into the first, taking another position at 11 or shuffling a little bit back, they all feel very risky, and also they all feel right. They feel like a good idea. If Nix and Penix truly are back of the first round prospects in a lot of people's minds, which we don't really know where the league stands on them. We only know where the draft analysis world stands on them. But if that is the case, then whichever one they like better. I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me. I go back and forth every day. Ask me on a different day who I like more, Nix or Penix. It's probably still Nix a little bit because of the injury history, but either way, whoever they like is fine. It is more risky, but it also makes a lot of sense to trade back into the first to get the fifth-year option and so forth. So I like that idea, and they do need, even though they've signed some defensive linemen, they still need defensive linemen. You just can't have enough. I see the Eagles added another one, Bryce Huff. You just can't have enough. Also, Eric Armstead, from the 49ers as a free agent as well, but they've already put a lot of money into this. So, I don't know. Jordan asks, how do you think Kirk is feeling right now? He has to be the exact deal he wanted, but bittersweet to leave Minnesota. Oh, for sure. I mean, what Kirk Cousins said, did I sound very Minnesota when I said for sure? Oh boy, the Packers are signing Xavier McKinney to a huge deal. This from Adam Schefter right now. And the Packers are spending, buddy. They are all in on their quarterback. Isn't it nice to draft a quarterback? And then, well, actually, their money situation with Jordan Love is going to be a little different. They won't have the whole advantage of the rookie quarterback contract, but they got their guy, and now they're going all in with Xavier McKinney. So a difference-making player for the Packers in their secondary. They're also going to have a new defensive coordinator. This is one of the reasons the Vikings moved on from Kirk, by the way, because these other teams, they're all in. And they are at spots where they can compete for a championship next year. The Vikings aren't there yet. And another all-in type move for the Packers. But to your question, I think Kirk made it very clear that over the last 2 years, he felt much more accepted and appreciated by Vikings fans. Now, that doesn't mean he always wasn't liked by Vikings fans. I think Vikings fans wanted him to succeed. And when he didn't, that's when they were upset. But they wanted him to succeed badly. That was why it was Super Bowl or bust when he came here. This is the guy that's supposed to take you to the next level. But I think Mike Zimmer and some of the veterans, but really Mike Zimmer, very much set the tone with Kirk Cousins. And then you also saw he came through big time in the clutch in 2022 and showed that he was capable. That was another sort of Kirk myth. Like, this is another episode sometime to talk more about this, but there's sort of a like Kirk myth and fact. Like, Kirk can't be clutch. I thought was always kind of a myth. That, I mean, his rate of, I remember doing an article on this, his rate of, I mean, this hater, of course, of whether the narrative was real. I looked into his opportunities for fourth quarter comebacks versus how often he converted, and it wasn't different from any great quarterback. That there were some quarterbacks like, Tom Brady, who might have been a little bit higher when they got their opportunities. But for the most part, he was right in the ballpark as far as being able to come back in fourth quarters, lead game-winning drives. Most of the time, quarterbacks don't. But the problem is that the Vikings lived on the edge so much with Cousins because they could never run away from people, because they played conservatively with him, because he would take the check down rather than take the shot so often, because he couldn't make a play and scramble for a first down with his legs. They stayed close in games all the time. And so there were a lot of those opportunities. And when he failed, as most of the time the quarterback does with game-winning drives, then it just was more of a spotlight. And when every game was, oh, you're in the hunt, you need this one, and then he doesn't come through, more of a spotlight. And then in 2022, he proved that he was capable of that. And he also showed us just how much luck goes into that sometimes, where Taylor Heineke throws you an interception or Josh Allen fumbles a quarterback sneak or something, that a lot of times fourth quarter comebacks can be a little bit overrated in our minds because, John Elway did it all the time or something when we were growing up, or at least me. So I thought, with Cousins, it was always that he just didn't have the next gear to run away from teams when he had opportunities, which led to a lot of those things. Now, that's not really answering your question, but the fact that he did that in 2022, the fact that he did the Netflix series that really showed a different side of him, and that he had his head coach having his back this entire time, and a young locker room that bought into him that overturned from the previous group, I thought he was leaving, or I think he's leaving Minnesota with a very good feeling. Oh, Barkley's going to the Eagles? Oh, wow. Okay. Sorry. I'm like, my sentence is already getting finished because this news is coming in. But I think he leaves Minnesota with a very good feeling about the state and about the team. And look, they gave him every opportunity. They gave him 6 years. That doesn't happen that often. Saquon got paid, huh? Okay. I never thought that was super realistic for the Vikings. So thank you guys for these updates, by the way. 3 years, 37.5 or 37.75 with 26 guaranteed. Hey, that's too much. Yeah, that's too much. Vikings could not play in that sandbox, or that's just too much for them to give. Now, the Eagles are all in, as they are every year when they have Jalen Hurts and this good roster still. So something like that you could see. Probably not a great move for them overall. Probably not the best way to spend their dollars on a running back who overall has been a little bit on the overrated side. I think he's really spectacular to watch, but he's got an injury history, and he never became the receiver that they expected him to become. I think he averages like 5.9 yards a reception or something. It's not impressive for Barkley. I thought it would have been a lot of fun if the Vikings signed him, if it was $9 million, but that dollar figure, that's a little bit excessive. I think it's for a player who's a star, it's not insane, but it's probably more than the Vikings wanted to spend. Robert Hunt gets $100 million over 5 years. Oh my gosh. How many out of 100 people know who Robert Hunt is? The guard who once caught a ball and ran for a touchdown that didn't count. That's what Robert Hunt is known for. The Panthers, though, they're making the right move. Their offensive line was an atrocity. An absolute atrocity. That's where, with Bryce Young, there is an opportunity for him to take a big step forward this year, because he had nothing in front of him last year, nothing to throw to, no running game to work with. They need someone like Robert Hunt. But also, this shows you, let the first wave of offensive linemen go, Vikings. Just let it go, and then sign 2 or 3 veteran players to compete for a guard spot. That's the best you can do right now. Draft one in the 3rd or 4th. Well, they don't have a 3rd. Draft one in the 4th round. See if you can develop that player. Now we got another running back off the board. This is crazy. Devin Singletary is going to the Giants. So we got more going on here. What a day. What a day. I agree with Hunter. This is wild. This is day 1, folks. We got a lot more time to go. Whew. CJ Ham is the man. Can't help but agree there. Says, is it possible that the Falcons tampered? Yeah, it's possible. Like, there was Kirk to the Falcons steam for weeks. Yeah. I mean, what are you going to do? Arrest them? Like, I don't know. I came back from the combine, and I felt very confident that the Falcons were far and away the team that was most likely to get Kirk Cousins, because of everyone I talked to there thought that he was going to go with the Atlanta Falcons. Were they tampering and that's how people were hearing it? Or were we just putting it together? I don't know. Who cares? That's how I feel. Who cares? Yeah, I agree with this take. Who cares? Like, yeah, it's a silly thing. Just overall, like with the whole tampering and all that, like, people are going to talk. That's how it's going to work. You can't stop Kirk Cousins' agent going to Indianapolis and having a conversation about the Falcons, about where they are. So that I'm not concerned. Huge Boy says, we spent $27 million of cap space on Cashman and Grenard. We are doing so much with the cap space freed up. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a edge rusher at 12.5 sacks and a starting linebacker who was in the top 5 by PFF. That is a lot. Yeah. I don't know if you're being sarcastic or not, but that's significant right there. And that's not even what the quarterback's contract is going to be, because Cousins is making over $40 million a year. So if they were to bring back Cousins, just by that math, because I know you're not using actual cap hits because we don't know the structure of those contracts yet. So those contracts are not going to be the average annual value, and the dollar figure, if that makes sense, like, is not the cap hit, because the cap hit will be spread out over years and is unlikely to be what their average annual value is for the next 2 seasons. But even then, even if we did it that way, we're talking about, see that? Yeah. I mean, not impact players. I mean, what? Okay. Everyone's allowed to have opinions. That's not a good one. Because that's $13+ million short of what Cousins' number per year is going to be. And Jonathan Grenard had 12 and a half sacks last year. That's not an impact player. What? A mid linebacker who was top 5 by PFF last year. Man, I don't know what you're talking about. I think that you wanted Cousins back. That's what it sounds like. And that's okay if that's what you wanted, but that doesn't make any sense. I mean, Grenard was in the top 10 in sacks last year. He had very good under the radar type of statistics. That he's not a perfect player. He's not Myles Garrett. They still need more on defense. I agree, but this is a very important position. The last time I checked, edge rusher, isn't it the second highest paid position in the NFL? That's pretty important. Not to mention, linebacker in a defense run by Brian Flores is pretty huge. And if you're going to really compete for a Super Bowl, then you probably just can't have a quarterback who can get you to the 10th best offense and no defense. You're going to need a complete team, and they are much closer to that today. But look, do all signings go right? No. Is it a guarantee that Jonathan Grenard is going to be great? No, but he was really, really excellent last year. And so was Blake Cashman. And so was Andrew Van Ginkel. So they're getting 3 players who were difference-making players on defense, 3 of them for the price of the quarterback. Yeah, that's a big deal. So that is a big deal. Anyway, I mean, not only that, but like the ceiling of just Cousins and what he can give you in general is not that high. So it really doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be just a comparison of 3 free agents that they sign. But I think this shows you, though, how much more free they are to make these types of moves, how much more free they are to go out and give the biggest amount of money to these top free agent players. So, yeah, I agree with you, Chad, that they are feeding Brian Flores. Look, you got Brian Flores back. I don't know how long he's going to be here. It might be 5 years. It might be next year he gets back into the mix as a head coach. But giving him this talent, considering what he did with not a lot of talent last year, gives them a chance. And if they weren't able to sign these players because they put $40+ million into the quarterback, then you'd just be hoping and praying. You would just be, let's hope that Patrick Jones takes the next step or something like that. I mean, I just it's all right if you wanted Cousins back. That's okay. But we can't then say that these guys that they signed aren't good when they were. So I mean, let's be realistic. A number 2 defensive end, as you called Grenard, which is fine, is very valuable and very important. Their number 2 defensive end in their best season is Danielle Hunter or Everson Griffin, depending on how you look at it. So they need to keep adding. They need a complete team. They need much more on defense other than this, but this is big progress. This is adding 20-something sacks and 700 to 1,000 snaps from a difference-making linebacker who we all knew, Blake Cashman, when he was coming out, that he had a lot of talent. It was just that it took years for him to get there. Andrew says, what are your expectations for wide receiver 3? I would expect that, and I don't want to get into Kendall Wright's land or Tajay Sharp land, where they sign a guy deep into the process and we all go, hey, this is their number 3 receiver, and then the guy never does anything. But that might have to be a little bit of the approach here because receivers are expensive. Gabe Davis was a target for me. He went off the board to a pretty big price to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, I think that you got to wait. With guards and number 3 wide receivers, you probably have to wait and see. I don't have if someone's got a target that they like for a number 3 wide receiver, because they're going to have an idea of who fits, I think they should bring back Brandon Powell as number 4, but they do need to get a number 3. They could wait to the draft. They could try, Jalen Naylor. They've been looking for that for a couple years. But I think they need to sign a veteran. It's just probably not right away. That wasn't something I was looking super close at outside of someone like Gabe Davis, because I just think that, that they're going to be expensive if they are at the top of the market like Gabe Davis was. And he's okay, but he's not a great player. And he got paid like he's a really good player. They could also, I don't love the idea of bringing KJ Osborne back, but I don't know if I'd be tremendously shocked if he did, because I don't know what his market is actually going to be. After last year, it was a down season for him. He dropped a lot of balls. I thought that the pressure got to him. That might be something that they consider, is bringing back KJ Osborne. And I know a lot of you would say, oh, are you serious or whatever? But look around at number 3 wide receivers. It's kind of hard. Like if they were to bring back Osborne and Powell, who I thought as a duo when Jefferson was down, the whole group, Addison, Powell, Osborne performed pretty well. With Hawkinson was a huge part of that. If they were to bring him back, draft a receiver, bring back Powell, have Naylor in the mix, it's a pretty good group behind 2 great wide receivers. Skol City Blues says, after that statement about these defensive players we signed, my gut is telling me Flores got a lot of toys today. Look for KOC to get one come draft night. Well, that's the thing. That's the trade-off. But if you're Brian Flores, you have to be like, dude, look what I did last year with not a lot. Give me a complete roster, and we're going to have something going on there. Jordan asks, Addison or O'Neal, who will other teams value more for trading up? It would be Addison for sure. Brian O'Neal is a great player and has been really good for a long time, but I don't think in some sort of trade that Brian O'Neal has a whole lot of value. You'd be looking, if you're another team in a trade up, that means you're rebuilding your roster. You don't really rebuild around a veteran, expensive offensive tackle. You would want, of course, somebody like Christian Darrisaw. Why only 2 years for Van Ginkel? That I don't know. Could it be because he's in his older 20s? I'm not sure. Maybe he wanted a shorter term deal so he could have the potential to hit another free agency. I'm not really sure. That's something that'll be worth asking when we get a chance, when they announce these guys. And we talk to Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, because I would have expected something to be a little bit longer than that for him. Jared says there's so many decent wide receivers out there. Give me some names. I don't have the list right up, and I'm reading all of your comments. So throw me some names in the comments if you got ideas for wide receivers. I'm all ears. Andrew says, if we get Osborne back, we're buying low, so I don't mind it. That's right. Now, is he a perfect fit for what they were asking him to do last year? I don't think so. I've always looked at KJ Osborne as much more a get the football in this man's hands and let him run. And they did more of that, I thought, at the end of 2022. Put the ball in his hands, underneath stuff, end around sometimes. And he's really good at running with the football. So if they're going to bring him back, they have to have a little bit better of a plan. But I also feel like Justin Jefferson getting hurt threw a wrench in everybody's plan, that suddenly they couldn't use him in more of that wide receiver 3 role. He also just had a couple drops where I thought he looked anxious to me because he had never dropped the ball before. And then this year, not like problematically, and then this year he did. It's like, whoa, like what's happening there? What type of quarterback is KOC looking for? Well, it must be one in the draft for them not to go crazy as far as like one of those skill sets. So O'Connell laid this out for us at the combine. He said that he's willing to work a lot of things around different quarterback skills. So that might be mobility, for example. But he said that there's some non-negotiables for him, and his top non-negotiable is accurate. So definitely looking for an accurate quarterback. And then he talked about character and the toughness and makeup mentally and processing and stuff like that he would understand how to scout better than us. We can only watch the games and read what people say. We can't sit down in a room at the combine or have a guy come on a visit where we can actually take them through something like O'Connell can. So I'm going to trust his judgment when it comes to which guy has the mental makeup. And that's probably the most important thing, because if you look at any of these draftable quarterbacks, all of them can throw the football. McCarthy's a little erratic, and Bo Nix does not have the power of his arm, but he did throw really effectively last year. So a lot of it might come down to what he thinks of their personalities. Does he think that they have the mental makeup to be his quarterback in the NFL? That's going to be a big deal because he's going to ask a lot of them. He's going to ask for a lot of reads. He's going to ask for a lot of command at the line of scrimmage, things that these guys have never done before. And that would lead you a little bit more toward McCarthy because he played for Jim Harbaugh. And Jim Harbaugh is as close as you're going to get to somebody implementing NFL stuff in college, even the kind of run first and play action that he loves so much. But he's going to need a quarterback with a lot of mental capacity, which may be JJ McCarthy. I've always looked, though, at Drake May and the arm talent as the thing that Kevin O'Connell would like the most. So, but I think that a lot of these guys match up with the things that he laid out. Jared TG says you don't need someone crazy as wide receiver 3. How many times are you throwing to him? 40 times, maybe. So this is true, but I also think that it's important because if you're going to throw all the time, then you need to have other options when they are able to take away somebody like Justin Jefferson or double team him. And that number 3 position could be pretty scary. TJ Hawkinson was kind of doing that. He might not start the season. But yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, you're like those 40 to 50 receptions, like they matter. They could be a big deal in key spots. And I think that Osborne was that for them in like 2021 and a little bit in 2022, just not as much last year. The Colts are keeping Grover Stewart. I kind of liked Grover Stewart. This is a big old strong dude. So the Colts are keeping him. That's another interior option that's off the list. Okay, what else we got? Let's see. Is the Faithful says, with Kirk going to Atlanta, what does this mean for Justin Fields? Doesn't seem to be a market for him. You guys have great questions today. You guys are crushing this. That's a great question. And I was talking about this with somebody earlier today. I have no idea. I mean, the Raiders, maybe? Like, who are the Raiders looking at? Could they be a trade-up team? Are they drafting a quarterback? But how much are they going to be willing to trade? I mean, Mac Jones. Oh, we got another running back off the board as we speak. I mentioned Gus Edwards. He's signing with the Chargers. So no Gus Edwards. We'll have to look for other running back options. Thanks, Adam Schefter alerts. My phone is running out. I've had so many Adam Schefter alerts that my phone is running out of battery. To your question about Justin Fields, when Mac Jones gets traded for, was it a 6th round draft pick? And Mac had his moments, but was never really that great with New England. I look at Justin Fields the same way, that he had his moments, but was never really that great. And Bears fans love to gaslight you. I mean, Bears fans and some of their media act like they saw greatness with Justin Fields. You guys watched Justin Fields play against the Vikings. Did you ever see it? You saw flashes, you saw moments, but a lot of quarterbacks can have flashes and moments. That doesn't make you a great quarterback. And if you're going to bring in Fields, I think you almost have to do it in the same way where you remember when the Titans got Ryan Tannehill, they were actually starting Marcus Mariota first. So whoever's doing it probably has to put Justin Fields with another quarterback in a competition. If I'm the Vikings, I'm not interested. I just don't see him as a good fit. I think that what Kevin O'Connell needs is someone who plays on time, in rhythm. He's mentioned this. He's talked about this. That is the opposite of Justin Fields. Everybody also has eyeballs. They saw the number of sacks that the guy took. They saw the number of mistakes that the guy made. And I've just never been huge in blaming the coach. Oh, well, Luke Getsy wasn't good at his job. That might be true, but that doesn't mean you should throw for 2,500 yards and 82 quarterback rating if you're actually a star. Could I see him going somewhere else and winning some games, more games? Yeah, but I don't look at him as someone that anyone buys into as a true future quarterback, which to me says Justin Fields is like a 3rd or a 4th round pick type of guy. And maybe some of you would be into that for the Vikings, but I'm not. I just don't see it. I don't see this magical ceiling that he's supposed to have. I look at him as somebody who could be a competent and somewhat successful quarterback for a handful of teams, and that's about it. And I don't really think the Vikings would be a good fit for him. Daniel, does the immediate spend on defense make it seem even more likely to go all in trading up? I guess so. I think what it is kind of like if, here's a good example. So for a long time, I had a car payment, my Honda Civic. Shout out to my Honda Civic. Thing is literally duct taped together, but I love it, and I'm not giving it up anytime soon. And for years, I had to have a payment for my Honda Civic. And then once I paid that off, that was a couple $100 in my pocket that I didn't have to spend anymore. So I went out and bought myself a new guitar. That's what we're doing. They don't have the Kirk Cousins payment anymore, so they're buying toys. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. They are instantly taking the money that they save in 2025 and putting it into multi-year contracts for expensive defensive players who can be serious difference makers for them. That's how I look at it. I don't know if it's an indicator of trading up or not, because they have so many spots to fill. Even if they still went out and got an edge rusher and used Van Ginkel as more of a roving type player, would that be a bad idea? Like, no, that would be a good idea. But I also think that they're looking for veterans to improve their defense right away over the next few years, not just for like getting a 30-year-old for right now or whatever, but also not getting just super young players and just drafting them and hoping. They're looking to kind of do both, it seems like, but they know they're going to have to spend on a quarterback one of these picks. And that means they can't put a ton into the defensive line for draft picks. So I'm not sure that it points us in a certain direction. What points us in the direction of a trade up for the Vikings now that Kirk Cousins is an Atlanta Falcon is that they tried to do it last year and that this is probably your one shot as a regime. Just the way the NFL works. Is it fair? Absolutely not, but it is what it is. You don't usually get to fail twice. So if you're going to take your one shot, and my friend from the Star Tribune, Ben Gessling, says this all the time. He's brought this up numerous times about the Vikings, is the regime may view it as, we have one guy that we want more than anything, and it's our one chance to look for our 10-year quarterback, so we're going for it. Now, that's only if they're sold on Drake May, but I think they would be willing to do it because of that mentality. You and I can sit here and say, hey, just draft a guy, and if it doesn't work, just draft another guy. But that's not how the NFL usually works with quarterbacks. Justin, any chance they get a bridge quarterback this year, win like 5 games, go all in on Shedeur Sanders? Not today, not after today. Was there a chance? Probably not, because they have Justin Jefferson and too much talent on the offensive side. But after today, after signing these players, they want to win next year. This is very clear. And this was probably part of the trade-off with the Wilfs to make this move. And, earlier in the show, if you missed it, I said, look, you guys that crush the Wilfs all the time, I think we have to give credit where it's due, that they were willing to let Cousins go and not pay that contract and not match that contract. But probably some of the trade-off was, hey, that doesn't mean you're tanking. That means go out, get these dudes who are going to fix this defense and be better. Thoughts? Jared says, thoughts on keeping Dalton Risner? Worth it. I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it if that's what they do. Price tag is going to be a big deal for sure. But when we talk about improving the running game, that's where I think they probably need to do better, because Dalton Risner wasn't just, and I'll get you the numbers on this, he wasn't just meh in the run. It was very bad in terms of his run blocking. Now, I really liked how he looked as a pass blocker. I thought he was an excellent pass blocker. But as far as how he was as a run blocker, he was bottom 10 by PFF grade as a run blocker. And for a team that really badly needs to improve its run blocking, that having a guy that's that bad can bring down everybody in the run game. And bottom 10 is too low for me. So yeah, I guess if they don't have better options, he's good in the locker room, motivational type guy, tons of energy. I think everybody seemed to gel with him pretty well. But if he can't run block and you're not getting Saquon Barkley, because the Eagles apparently have gotten Saquon Barkley, then I need better. I need better as far as run blocker. I'm a twerk says, don't panic on running backs. Plenty of mid to late candidates. Also, many heavy guys to go thunder lightning with Chandler. I like the option for the Vikings at running back of getting somebody on the second wave of free agency, and then drafting someone in the late rounds, because sometimes you never know about the late round running backs. We see them succeed, and there's a good number of veterans, your Latavius Murray, Jerick McKinnon types, who can come in and run the ball 100 times, 120 times, and be in a pairing, but also be that third down blocker because they understand blocking scheme, and let Ty Chandler play first and second downs. Kind of how the league works now. That's a good option. Skol City Blues says Vikings worst green team in the NFL. Nick's best quarterback coming out of college throwing screen pass. Oh, screen, not green. You meant screen. Oh, so I see what you mean. Yeah. Now I got it. That he's the best screen pass quarterback. I mean, they could take some stuff from Oregon with those screen passes. This is actually some of the point about Dalton Reisner. You can't run great screens when you have a guy with no mobility like that. You need a offensive line that's really athletic to run good screens. And the best that they did was when they had a smaller athletic offensive line in 2019, and they were successful with throwing a lot of screen passes. So they need that. For the next quarterback, they need this stuff to be better. They need to run the ball better. They need to throw screens better. There's no doubt about it. I also think that the idea that Bo Nix, and I know you're kidding, but the idea that he only threw screens is like people who just didn't watch enough. And that's where I've been going through. And now it's like really go time. But I've been going through film breakdowns from smart people looking at Bo Nix, looking closer, and talking to people in the scouting world that I know. And there's a little bit of split on that still about Bo Nix. Some people don't like that he's a little older, but his ability to get the ball to the right places in the intermediate and even deep part of the field, was it the strongest, most perfect throw all the time? Maybe not. But also, he seemed to really understand where the ball was supposed to go and was able to get it to the open guys. And, we even saw that from Brock Purdy, where the physical skills are not insane, but the supporting cast, the offense, the execution, put them in the Super Bowl. So, sometimes you don't have to have the perfect quarterback if he is mentally tough enough, strong enough to get the ball to the right places. What defensive tackles are targets? Well, let's see. So we've got Grover Stewart off the market, Christian Wilkins off the market. I'm very interested in Eric Armstead if they were going to go with another big signing along the D line. Sheldon Rankins would be my, hey, that guy's not going to cost that much money guy. That's who it would be for me. Jamie says either May or Daniels, no risk, no reward. Yeah, that's true. That's true. We've got Chris Sims entering the chat again here from Tristan. Chris Sims, 100% convinced me that Drake May is not going to be a good quarterback. Well, and look, not personal. Chris Sims, love the bit. I love the bit that he does every year where he ranks the quarterbacks and he ranks them differently than everybody else has them. However, he was super high on Kellen Mond. So one guy's opinion is not the fact. And, I just had Derek Klassen on the show from Bleacher Report, who has only studied quarterbacks. He charts every throw for years of rookie quarterbacks coming out. And I'm talking about using spreadsheets, data, every single throw, watching and analyzing every single throw. And he's not perfect, but he said he would trade whatever it took to get Drake May. So which one of those guys put more work into that evaluation, do you think? Probably Derek did, but Chris Sims is on a bigger show. And that's no hate. I love the bit. I think it's fun for people to go against the grain sometimes and interesting to hear that opinion. But I don't think you should just watch one opinion on these quarterbacks and say, oh, yeah, well, I believe that guy. Is the faithful. I heard JJ McCarthy started following Addison and Jefferson on social media. Yep, it's that time of year, buddy. Look, JJ McCarthy just makes a lot of sense. He makes a lot of sense because the Vikings could get another quarterback like Sam Darnold, pair him with JJ McCarthy, develop McCarthy for a while, and then turn the reins over to him. And he has the tools and I think the mental capacity and intellect to work with Kevin O'Connell, to understand where to throw the football. And what I've been a little bit, I don't know, like a little bit hesitant on is to call him a great athlete. But then at the combine, when he ran that absurd 3-cone, and I know that's the underwear Olympics or whatever, but it puts on paper, like, how quick are this guy's feet? And the answer is really quick. That's like wide receiver feet. And you know who else has that? I mentioned Brock Purdy, but there's a lot of quarterbacks who have quick feet in the pocket. You don't run 40 yards as a quarterback. You probably run for 12 yards. And McCarthy being able to do that impressed me. So if mentally he is all in with Kevin O'Connell, and if he's got the arm strength, he needs work on technique. He's got the arm strength, and they feel like there's a ceiling there to develop into, yeah, then do it. Go get your guy that you feel like is going to be the best fit for this offense, for Jefferson, for Addison, Hawkinson, and see what happens. Cody says, I'm in awe that you still have your voice. I know. You guys know, if you've been watching or listening to the show for a while, that I do have a tendency to lose my voice after a while, but I turned the microphone up and I'm talking less loud than usual. Little audio trick. So I'm good, but I was prepared for that. And I got the McDonald's Diet Coke. This is the elite of the elite. If you're going to stay like at 100%, it's the best. I don't know what they do to the Diet Coke at McDonald's. It's incredible. Hatfield Barbecue says, been a fan since OG Purple Daily at my former show from the 1500 ESPN days. Shout out to Hot Routes. Yep. Hey, Manny's going to be back. Thursday night is the plan for Manny. So all of you who watch throughout the season, me and Manny Hill, Manny's coming back to break this down. Not going to be doing every show through the off season, but he's excited. My phone has been exploding, by the way, over the last like 2 hours, and I saw Manny texted me, so he's excited. Thoughts on Aaron Jones? Should we go after him? My issue with Aaron Jones, as a Aaron Jones enjoyer, I am always so impressed by him. He has destroyed the Vikings many times, is just the injury history. That's the trouble. The injury history with Aaron Jones. I mean, if it didn't cost much, but you're really looking for someone who could be there over multiple years, I think. I really think that you're looking for a running back who could be there for 2 to 3 seasons. That's maybe 26 and not 29 with a bunch of injuries. I really like him, though. If they did it, I mean, that's an exciting move and kind of a little bit of a win now-ish move, which would be, interesting to see how it worked out. Yeah, I think he's a great player. It's just, how many games is he going to play? David says, why are people mentioning Shadur Sanders? Well, if you can't spell Shadur right, I'm not sure I take your opinion super serious. He's worse than Fields. A head case because of his dad. David, you have no idea what you're talking about, man. Sorry. You just have no idea what you're talking about. You don't know how to spell Shadur Sanders correctly, and you're just making stuff up. Shadur Sanders is a phenomenal NFL prospect. Everyone I've talked to feels that way. And I watched a lot of his games this year. It's a terrible Colorado team. He was fantastic. He was super accurate, made plays outside of the pocket, had great analytic statistics. No, Shadur Sanders is a great prospect. His dad is probably holding him back, honestly, because it's not a good team. If he was playing for like an Alabama or something, the numbers he put up would be amazing. He's one of the most accurate and calm quarterbacks that I've seen as a prospect in a long time. The point as it relates to the Vikings is just that that's not on their timeline. Their timeline is for right now. It's not to tank. If it was, then they wouldn't have signed Van Ginkel. They wouldn't have signed Jonathan Gennard. So, they just wouldn't have done those things. Because they clearly want to draft the quarterback right now. That's why they let Kirk Cousins go. They don't want to do it next year. Ken says Bo Nix could be there, I think. I think so, too, that at number 11 or even potentially a trade back, that he could be their guy. One thing they have to get intel on is how these other teams that are behind them feel about these quarterbacks. Because if you pass on Bo Nix to try to trade back into the first, and then Denver takes him, like, Bo Nix could be a very Denverian type of quarterback. So you might have to just take him at 11 or try to trade up potentially for McCarthy if the Giants want him. There's so many options. So many options. This must pertain to Justin. Is this Justin Fields, or are we talking about Caleb Williams? He's going to get run out of Chicago. Curious if we'll ever see a quarterback pull a Manning and straight up say he won't play for a team. No, I don't think that's ever going to happen. Caleb Williams is going to play quarterback for the Bears. It's not going to happen. If Burrow went to the Bengals and Trevor Lawrence went to the Jaguars, it's just not going to happen again. It was a very unique situation, and the NFL has changed massively since that happened. Every franchise is good. They're all crazy billionaires, and teams get better so much faster now than they used to with the rookie quarterback contracts that we very, very likely will not see that ever again. And I mean, will he get run out of Chicago? I don't know. I mean, it's going to be a curve for Caleb Williams to get used to playing in a market that's pretty intense in Chicago. But I also think I've heard a lot of people say, well, it's Chicago. They can never have a great quarterback. Look, you're talking to the wrong guy when it comes to that, because my entire life, the Buffalo Bills had Todd Collins, Drew Bledsoe, Rob Johnson, JP Lossman, EJ Manuel, and then I move and they get Josh Allen. So maybe it was me, but quarterback history has nothing to do with what's coming next. And, what's happened in the past does not prove what's going to happen in the future. So with Caleb Williams, it's one of those people that, or one of those situations where it's going to be a challenge because of the market. And he clearly has some up and down roller coaster emotional moments that we've seen in college. And I'm really curious of how he handles that. But if you're the Vikings, you need to assume he's going to be good. And you need to assume the Bears are going to be a behemoth to deal with and build your team with that type of long-term vision. That the Vikings just need to take that very seriously. So, okay, well, let's see here. Gosh, I mean, a lot more comments coming in. What type of guitar did I buy? Let's see. When I finally paid it off, because I have quite a few. Which one was that? I think it was a Nashville style Fender Telecaster. It's what I bought after I paid off the car. And that was about a year's worth of car payments. But well, if you know that the Nashville style Telecaster is really cool. It's got the 3 pickups instead of the 2. Very cool. Maybe that'll be my other YouTube channel at some point. All right. Let's see. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Gaetano says, will Harbaugh trade with the Vikings considering the history? I don't know. Maybe. He's not the one that's doing it. It's their general manager. I've got 20. You got 21 guitars. I'm at like 8. A lot of times I will bring them in and then move them out. So if I don't love one, then I'll just go get a different one. But 21 is a lot. That's like a whole house worth of guitars. Sue says KOC could possibly revive Zach Wilson's career. That's a pass on me. For me, I'm not into that idea, because with someone like Sam Darnold, he's shown something before. There have been some highs for Sam Darnold and just, some lows as well. But there have been no highs for Zach Wilson. I don't like, and the character as well is just not a great situation. He's not well prepared. He didn't seem to understand leadership at all. Just that's a total pass. Well, I guess a lot of you are guitar players. That's awesome. The Packers gave Jacobs 4 years, $48 million, huh? They're going for it, man. I mean, you would too. You would too. With Jordan Love and the way he played last year, you would too. Play us some Van Halen. Well, I don't have my guitar in the room, but I do play that style, 80s shred style. Sometimes I think I was born a little bit in the wrong era, but Ryan Tannehill is the best option for a backup type quarterback. He is a veteran and he does have a strong enough arm, but the injury history is it's just not good. Like the last 2 years of Ryan Tannehill have been so bad that I think it's probably time to move on. So Jonathan Harrison, that the Raiders are apparently talking about trading for Fields. That makes the most sense for a location. Am I a Steel Panther fan? Yes. Their guitar player, is it Satchel, is unbelievable. Yes, I do. Now we're on to music takes. You want to learn guitar? The best suggestion to get started, it's just to go for it. There's lots of beginner YouTube videos, but it's just like anything else. It's a process. It takes a long time to get your fingers trained, especially if you're on the older side. So you do have to be very patient. But I would say try to learn songs. Just try to learn songs early so you can feel like you're doing something. Because if you're taking beginner lessons and it's just like A, B, C, picking the notes, you're going to feel like a dope. Gardner Minshew signed with the Raiders. Okay. Maybe they're just going to throw everything at it. I don't know. Yeah, that's, well, 2-year deal. So that takes a bridge quarterback off the market there. He's going to compete with Aiden O'Connell. That doesn't sound that good for the Raiders. They've got to have something. Definitely have to have something more going. Matthias says thoughts on Drake May being a Viking. I will maintain this until someone tells me otherwise, that Drake May is the best fit for Kevin O'Connell. He is the quarterback that just has the arm talent. He throws over the middle of the field. This is something that Nate Tice of The Athletic has talked about a lot. But throwing over the middle of the field is a huge deal in Kevin O'Connell's offense. And Drake May is big. His arm is strong enough. He's comfortable with doing that from his college offense. He just fits so much. We need a Coller farewell ballad to Kirk on the live stream. Yeah, I guess I should have written one like an 80s ballad with the piano and all that, you know. I'm not gonna do it right now, but you know what I mean. Raiders unintentional tank coming. I don't think so, because they've really improved their defense. But I mean, it's going to be a tough division. And if the only answer they have is Minshew and O'Connell, they've got to be thinking about drafting a quarterback, right? If they don't trade for Fields, they've got to be thinking draft. This is just there's a lot of dynamics here for the Vikings in the draft all of a sudden. Maybe we'll spend 2 months talking about it. Sounds fun to me. But the Raiders are one of those teams. So the Falcons aren't drafting a quarterback now at 8. We know the Titans probably aren't at 7 because they're going to stick with Will Levis. So the Giants, the Raiders, the Broncos, because the Broncos, they don't have any options right now. They got to be looking to the draft. All these teams are going to be jockeying for position. Everybody knows that they want quarterbacks. How interesting. Steven says, is Howell a potential bridge quarterback? Yeah. I mean, I actually like Sam Howell probably more than most people. That team last year was a wreck, but he battled for most of the season and he has a good arm. He just takes a ton of sacks and needs some coaching. I also think that this is like we're 2 hours into the podcast sort of take, but I don't think anyone's ever been more overrated than Eric Bieniemy. Like Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, they won the Super Bowl without him. He goes to Washington, doesn't make his offense a shred better. Sam Howell, though, has an NFL arm and some athleticism and some guts. Very Ryan Fitzpatrick-y, though, but that's like what a bridge quarterback is. Is the Faithful says Justin Fields might not be traded at all. They may have to just hang on to him, and then awkward. Very, very awkward. This is an interesting option. Justin Fields to the Giants. That is an interesting option, but don't they already have a bad quarterback who's drafted high? Had to be said, right? But yeah, I mean, if you're Brian Daboll, you might think, hey, I turned around Josh Allen, so, I can do it again. I don't know that he really turned around Josh Allen or he was just on his way to greatness, but coaches think that way. I like that as an option for them, for the Giants. Or they're just going to draft quarterback, or the Vikings have to trade up ahead of them, or many other things. Brian says defensive tackle Murphy, the 11th pick, and Penix next. Man, Byron Murphy is a beast. He is a beast. I'm not going to let go of the defensive tackle thing until they get one. I just very much still believe, even after today, when they go and make these big moves, that they need a defensive tackle. Okay. Sue says, what happens if we couldn't get a trade to move up and miss the top 4? Then you pick the next one. That's what I would say. Look, there's 6 quarterbacks who at least have reason to believe that you should like them. So you would just have to pick the next guy up if that was what happened. What about Fields to the Broncos? I think that Sean Payton would absolutely despise Justin Fields. That would be a pretty tough fit. Okay. Hunter is with me, likes Sam Howell. How realistic is it? I don't give it a high chance to trade up for Drake May. I think that's going to be hard because the teams at the top are going to want him. And now that, Kirk didn't go to Washington, what a stupid rumor, by the way. Can we just say that Kirk would return to Washington? Are you serious? That was never going to happen. I don't know where that came from. That was nuts. Was that his agent putting out every team possible? You got to be kidding me. So anyway, it's going to be hard to trade up. It's going to take a lot, and it would have to be one of those teams deciding they don't believe in those quarterbacks. So, Stardom 910, we aren't a contender contrary to their short-sighted moves. Well, they're signing multi-year contracts, and they're in their mid to late 20s, the players that they signed. So these are not just one-year signings for this next season to try to win the Super Bowl. These are players that you can build your defense over the next several seasons. I mean, Jonathan Gennard is only 27, and Van Ginkel's a little bit older. It's a multi-year deal, though. And Blake Cashman is 27. So you've probably got 3 to 4 years more of him being a quality NFL player. So that it's, I don't think they went like all in today. Eric Armstead, I would really like that. Yeah, for sure. I think that would be a great move. Now, how much money he's going to command, that's the question. It's probably a lot. And also, I mean, why are they releasing him is a bit of a question. Maybe they couldn't work anything out contract-wise, but I mean, I think he's a good player. That would be really something. Skol City Blues, does it seem strange to anybody else that Mac Jones was traded to the Jaguars? Would that be worth a call to see if Trevor Lawrence might be available? Trevor Lawrence is not available. I promise you, Trevor Lawrence is not available. They're gonna go after that with Trevor Lawrence for the next 8 years. They're not moving on from him anytime soon. But Mac Jones to the Jaguars just tells me that 0 people were interested. So his hometown team said, sure, a 6th. Why not? And Lawrence got hurt last year, and I think it was like CJ Beathard as their backup. No. Leonard Williams, please. Leonard, I worry a bit about the age. He has passed where his prime was a few years ago, but on a shorter term deal, maybe not too risky. I just didn't love the way that he played in Seattle last year. I had higher expectations for him. Didn't do a whole lot there. So, this is the funniest comment of the day. Most Minnesota fans are too young to know how much Tarkenton was like Cousins. As a real lover of NFL history, I could tell you Fran Tarkenton was absolutely nothing like Kirk Cousins. Absolutely nothing like it. When Fran Tarkenton retired, he was statistically the greatest quarterback to ever play. Statistically. He was also the ultimate playmaker. He was undersized, but he was doing Mahomes stuff before anybody else was. He was an unbelievable scrambler, totally different as far as the way that he played the game and the caliber of player. Fran Tarkenton is the most underrated quarterback probably in the history of the NFL. If he wins one of those Super Bowls, then he is talked about in the echelon of the greatest of the great in history. So no, that's not similar at all. Fran Tarkenton's biggest problem is that he lost Super Bowls. So that's different. Yeah, I'm baffled by that one. That is definitely a what are we doing here today? I mean, there's been some great takes from you guys today. That's a miss. That is a miss. Jeff says we're trying to acquire as much young veteran talent as they can afford. They're building for the next 3 years. Yep, I think that's the perfect explanation, Jeff, that these players that they're getting are going to be here over multiple seasons. Hunter says, if Fran Tarkenton was a quarterback today, then sure, but compared to that time period, not even close. If Fran Tarkenton was a quarterback today, he'd probably be, I mean, saying Mahomes is a little silly, but he would be in the elite upper echelon if you were transferring how the game is played now. Just a brilliant, brilliant playmaking quarterback, field general, tough as nails, leader. I mean, just like, come on. Like, well, let's go watch some NFL films together on Fran Tarkenton. That's you're probably right. You're probably right that it's a sign it's time to shut it down when we get to the Fran Tarkenton. That's true. Okay, from Jordan, thank you for this update. Gardner Minshew, a 2-year, $25 million deal that includes $15 million fully guaranteed. So 2 years, 25 million, 15 million. I would have paid that for a bridge quarterback. That's not bad. I don't know that he was really a good fit for the Vikings. The arm talent is just lacking, and you need arm talent to play for O'Connell. That's why I've always been very much on board with Sam Darnold. And Blowfishes says, have been watching Darnold games, way too many 50-50 balls. The easy pitch and catch balls made difficult with the lack of accuracy. Oh, he's got problems for sure. If he did need it, he'd be a starter. Yeah, I mean, that's the reason he was a backup, is that it seemed like there were way too many hero ball attempts from Darnold, way too many bad turnovers. The highlight plays were countered by missing on the easy stuff. And that's why if you're bringing him in, it's much more as a, like, let's see what we've got here. Let's see if he's developed some of that stuff, worked it out, as Geno Smith and Ryan Tannehill did once upon a time. And if you have to play him, he can win some games with the right circumstances. But you wouldn't be doing it as all eggs in that basket. Darnold's our guy. No, that'd be crazy, because he does have flaws. And his flaws can be hilarious and insane sometimes with the stuff that he does. Sue asks, what do you think the best move for the Vikings is to make right now? Well, I think that they should look at defensive tackle and the L'Jarius Sneed situation. Can they bring in one more really good player on the defensive side that's going to be a difference maker? Maybe it's via trade. And then everybody just take a deep breath. Then hit the brakes for a couple days. This is the day where everybody overpays, and let's let the dust settle and then fill out some of these other positions in the coming days. But they probably need one more defensive player as a difference maker. Mullins on steroids is such a funny description of Sam Darnold. Mike says, if the Vikings don't announce a bridge quarterback free agent, I would assume it's a high indicator of drafting a rookie starter. Well, we know, at least we think we know, unless they have a plan we haven't heard of. Kyler Murray, maybe? Probably not. But unless there's a plan that they have not, that has not presented itself to us, it's pretty clear that they're going to draft a quarterback that is going to compete for the starting spot. And what a time that is to be alive. That's going to happen. So let me wrap on this, because now I am starting to lose the voice a little bit. And I think we've said, once we've reached the Fran Tarkenton analysis portion and the guitars portion of the podcast, we've probably gone too far and need new information. And look, I'm going to be around. I'm going to spend some time writing and analyzing what's happened for the Vikings. And you should sign up for the newsletter. Go to purpleinsider.com. Look at the written work there. You can sign up for the newsletter. You can sign up on the free side or on the support the Purple Insider side if you like. Go check that out. I'm going to have a column going up about the end of Kirk Cousins' era that you can read very soon. Got to work on that. And then we'll see what happens. If there's some other moves that go on today, then I'll be back later on to go live on the channel. But let me just put a wrap on this day by reiterating something that I said earlier and that I've probably alluded to many times, is that this feels like the gates have opened and you walk through it to the future. And maybe I've described it as something like the shackles coming off. Maybe that's not quite as accurate, as the door is open to the future now. It's wide open. They have an opportunity now, it feels like, to take the step toward playing for an actual championship, which it has not felt like that in a very long time. And that makes it, for Minnesota Vikings fans, one heck of a day to see Kirk Cousins sign with the Atlanta Falcons. And the best of luck to him in Atlanta. I think they made the right move for their situation. I think he made the right decision to go to a team where he could win. And this is good for everybody involved, and especially for the front office, the ownership, and the head coach. The head coach gets to pick his quarterback. The front office gets to spend the money, and credit to the ownership for not bending to this dollar figure, because this would have been a huge, huge mistake to have spent $180 million. There is so much more to go. There is so much more work to be done for the Minnesota Vikings. This is not a championship. Nobody raised a banner. Nobody put a ring on. There's a lot to do here. But the fact that it feels like the opportunity is now there for the Vikings to chase that championship, to use a model that has worked for many teams to be truly competitive, to build a full defense, a full offensive line, to use the money that is going to be created to draft a quarterback who could have playmaking potential or a higher ceiling than Kirk Cousins. It makes it one of the best days for Vikings fans in a while. And I don't mean that as a diss to Kirk Cousins. That's just the world that the Vikings live in right now. It feels like one of the more exciting days in recent Vikings history for Cousins to have moved on to Atlanta. So thank you all so much for watching this version. There will be others. There will be guests. There will be analysis. There will be reactions. A lot will be happening. So really, really appreciate all of you guys coming and stopping by this live stream. Subscribe to the channel. And you guys are just so good in the chat. Cannot thank you enough. You're respectful to each other. You have good ideas. You're knowledgeable and helpful in breaking news to me. So thank you so much to everybody who participated. And we'll see you again very soon. I'm not sure when, but as some of you have alluded to, that there's probably an emergency podcast right around the corner. So I may be back soon. But thanks everybody for joining this one. And I hope you continue to do so in the future. Take care for now. Football.